This is NDTV, and you are watching NDTV Prime.
It's great to have you here with us today. Art Tactic puts out confidence indicators for countries and emerging markets all around the world. What confidence did you guys put out for the Indian art market?
The confidence report is a kind of a product we started in India in 2007, and it was a kind of a way of starting to look at slightly different types of data. A lot of focus in the art market is around auctions and price data, and we felt that why don't we start to talk about sentiment? What do people think about the market? So this was really based on qualitative interviews, and we set up a sample of experts in the auction, gallery, collectors, and surveyed them on a 6-monthly basis. And what we've seen, particularly now in the last, I would say, 2-3 years, has there been a steady confidence in the Indian art market, which I think is a signal of things changing. And we were talking about the kind of a market in transition, and there's a lot of things that is actually now going on in the Indian market that is positive, besides what's actually happening in the auction. So the global art market had a very difficult period in 2016. I mean, we had London and New York sales down between 40 and 50%. India is more or less flat, which I think is a very positive thing that's actually weathered what's actually happening here, in the global settings.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you highlighted, I think, the most in this report was the move from public institutions supporting art to private institutions. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think this is typical in many markets where there is a lack of public support. You sort of relying on private foundations and private individuals and private corporations and so forth to kind of take the role that the government may not have an interest in at that point. In a sense, someone needs to take the lead, and I think at the moment the private patrons, the foundations are already doing this. Private museums are doing this. They're setting an example. It's starting to draw attention from international both media and collectors and other institutions. And so I think this is it's not going to happen overnight. I'm sure there are other priorities that the Indian government has with as a country as a whole. But I think bit by bit we're going to start to see more investment, co-investment from others, and I think that will start to build a very much stronger infrastructure than we see today.
So then what do you think is actually going to be sort of that next move that boosts the Indian art market? Is it going to be inculcating the Indian art appreciator, or is it going to be putting Indian art in front of international viewers?
Those two things go together, and I think we already start to see interesting things with obviously the Gaitonde at the Guggenheim. We're starting to see Nasreen Mohammadi. You're starting to see Indian artists now being exhibited in the top museums in the world. And I think that movement is starting to also, there's almost a kind of a reappreciation or a refocus on both female and non-female artists, and from a certain segment, and also now that will probably start to shift further into also to more the contemporary. So what I think this is and very important, because it's not that the international validation is an important thing, because the global market in a sense is not only validated in one or specific country, but the fact that these artists are now validated by major institutions, I think will give credibility to the market itself. That together with these continuous efforts that's being put into developing the Indian art market, both from the galleries that are putting on exhibition programs to the auctions and to the festivals and the biennials and the artist-run spaces. All those things together will start to, that there is, and this is I think what the report is really talking about, that there is a momentum. It's not that it's an incredible big snowball yet, but it's starting to snowball. And this is, in 10 years, when we looked at this market, it's the first time I'm starting to see a sort of different type of sentiment, a different type of optimism, an optimism based on the art itself rather than all the kind of more economic side of it. And I think if that starts, then it's a good starting point to also then relate that to potential economic and investment value in the future.
I would say that optimism also comes from somebody here being able to say that a Bhupen Kakkar is at the Tate, or that a Nasreen is at the Met. But it was such a red letter year for Indian modern art that way, and yet modern artists really took a dip. Can you talk about what that means, and is it actually a bad thing?
No, I think it is. When we sort of talk about, sometimes when we look at that's why I think is the risk of looking at auction data is that it's very susceptible to what comes to the market. So if an amazing Gaitonde comes to the market, there's always a buyer for an amazing Gaitonde at any point in time. There's always people who has that amount of wealth to put that into these quality works. So you are susceptible to, when the pool of works available in the marketplace is relatively limited, and also maybe the pool of collectors are relatively limited, then suddenly you know, it looks like it's a dip, but actually, as I said, also in the Western market, we saw in the modern contemporary a dip of 42% last year. But if you look at the prices hasn't actually changed that much. It's just the inventory that is coming to the market is no longer the same as it used to be. And I think
that should drive up prices in the future, though, right? Supply and demand.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, obviously, the problem is that if then the auction only becomes the barometer for what is actually happening, and that's the problem. Because if you then, so like you said, you know, the market is now down, took a dip, and people say, well, the modern market is now, you know, in a negative territory. They kind of misread the actual market a bit. It's actually the opposite, almost like in the sense that there's just very limited material to the market. But definitely these museum shows are, I think, incredibly important to lend credibility to also the auction prices. So I would say in the future, and this is that these works will come to the market. There will be buyers for them for sure. One needs to be a little bit careful of just reading into the kind of trends in the market, because sometimes it is, as I said, just depends on what's available at any given point in time.
We can look at auction information. That information is largely public, at least the monetary information is. Someone like Arctactic, are you able to also really extrapolate numbers from these fairs, where we're told a lot about how many transactions happened or that it was a wild success, but the numbers really, they're not public necessarily to back that. And same with galleries. Are you guys able to independently quantify these claims?
It would be beautiful to have obviously every single transaction data in both the primary markets and the secondary market, as well as the auction. I think the reality is that it's very difficult to get. I mean, what we do is that, and that's really what your first question, we talked about confidence surveys. We're trying to use another mechanism, not extracting exact prices, because that would be very difficult and sensitive often for many, is to extract opinions about and make that, you know, like you said, you know, oh, it went incredibly well, this fair was fantastic. Well, that can be assessed, because that you can actually talk to quite a lot of people about what they felt, something, you know, was it really that good?
Enough?
I don't think it's enough. I think it's. I mean, the art market is a relatively non-transparent market. It has moved a long way. I mean, in the last 10, 15 years, the fact of having auction databases and so forth has created transparency. I think technology, social media, all of those things will gradually change it. So I think this non-transparency that exists at the moment, I would say over the next 5 years, I think this is going to disappear.
That's great.
Yeah.
So one significant public act was the Antiquities Act. Can we talk a little bit about that? And you guys had a write-up that basically said that it's a bad idea.
Well, this is it was one of the comments from one of our contributors. I mean, it's not really my field of expertise, but obviously these things is, it's about trade and creating a marketplace, and to, how do you stimulate a market when, you can't, shift works from one place to the other. And obviously that makes a market, just from a market point of view, vulnerable in the fact that it's reliant on a domestic collector base. And then I think there's obviously issues also about making things easier to bring things back from abroad back into things in order to kind of, recoup national heritage. So I think, we are such an early stage of the market. I guess what people are afraid of is that these different, regulations imposed on them could kill the market before it sort of even gets started. But I think, generally, I think this, again, is a kind of a positive development that we're starting to see. People are shifting, diversifying, exploring new areas, developing connoisseurship. Again, there's, impressive museums here in India that also can, have the knowledge and have the, that's where people can actually, engage with many of these subjects.
But from a market point of view, there was a very interesting anecdote in this write-up, which said that Indian buyers were coming to New York with such gusto to buy back these cultural products. Yeah. And it's heartening that they had the gusto to buy them, but ultimately they got outbid by American and European buyers. And to me, what that says is that A, there's a parallel market for classical works that's more expensive outside of India. And B, that just because an Indian buyer wants to reclaim its culture doesn't mean that that work is coming back. So what do you think is going to happen when these two markets are happening in parallel? And two, is that really beneficial for Indian culture and the art market?
I guess in the antiquities market, you see it also in the Chinese, there's always been these parallel markets between the domestic and the international. I mean, the Chinese has done exactly the same. They started to buy back. I mean, the Chinese are now, they are the ones who pays the most. And I think this is happening also in India. Indians going to start to be the ones that are outbidding the Americans, and because they're going to start to realize the value of these objects from a very different point of view. And when you're starting to repatriating these objects and wanting to bring it back, you're starting to, there's not enough money there, but I think people didn't necessarily, they had a threshold in their mind of what they were willing to spend on these things, but I think that is going to change. So in a sense, I guess the market will just get stronger and stronger here in India, and because of the way the market is and the way that actually international cannot really export works out of India, means that I think we're going to start to see more and more works coming back into India.